Most perennials give you 3 weeks of color and then disappear on you until next spring. 3 weeks. And then you are left staring at a border full of green leaves that contributes nothing to your yard from July through October. That is not a garden. That is a seasonal disappointment you spent real money on. But here is what the nursery industry does not advertise. There is an entirely different category of perennial. Plants that bloom from late spring and keep going through the first killing frost. Plants that feed hummingbirds in September, when almost everything else has already shut down. Plants that your neighbors walk past every single day and have never once planted in their own yard. 20 of them, right here. And at least 7 on this list, experienced gardeners with decades in the dirt, have never grown. Number 14 stops hummingbirds mid-flight. Number 9 gives you 2 completely different garden performances in a single season. And number 3 produces a color so rare in the summer garden that people pull over their cars to ask what it is. Stay with this list all the way through because the order matters. The plants that most gardeners overlook are saved for the second half, and those are the ones that will genuinely transform what your yard is capable of doing. Before plant number 1, subscribe to Nature Green Discoveries right now. Every week this channel delivers zone-specific, experience-backed information that saves you real money at the nursery and real time in the yard. The next video on this channel is something every gardener in this country needs to see before they buy a single plant this season. Hit subscribe so it lands in your feed the moment it goes live. Plant 1, Catnip Nepeta. Nothing delivers more color for less effort across more months than a well-placed catnip border, and almost every American gardener who grows it makes the exact same mistake. They underplant it. 1 or 2 plants tucked into a corner does nothing. A full run of catnip along a pathway or draping over the front edge of a border in late May looks like a purple cloud sitting at ground level. The flowers are soft lavender blue and they do not stop. Catnip runs from late May through October in most American gardens, and the secret to keeping it producing all season long is a single clean cutback right after that first big June flush. Cut it down by 1/3, not more. Within 3 to 4 weeks, it comes back fuller and more loaded than the first time. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. This plant was built for climates from northern Minnesota to the mid-Atlantic. Every bee in your zip code will find it. Plant it along pathways, let it spill down a slope, or drape it over the front of a border. It spreads beautifully without ever becoming the kind of plant that takes over everything around it. Plant 2, Black-Eyed Susan, Rudbeckia. The reason Black-Eyed Susan earns an early spot on this list is not just because it is beautiful. It is because plant breeders have finally solved the one problem that frustrated American gardeners with this plant for decades. The old types developed leaf spot by midsummer and looked ragged right when you needed them performing at their best. Varieties like American Gold Rush and Little Gold Star are now disease-resistant, stay clean all season, and push out rich golden yellow flowers with deep chocolate brown centers from late June through the first hard frost. That is one of the longest natural bloom windows of any perennial available to American gardeners, full stop. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. When September comes and monarch butterflies begin moving south toward Mexico, they stop at Rudbeckia specifically. A yard full of these in late summer is a legitimate way station on one of the most extraordinary migrations on this planet. Plant it in the middle of a border, mass it along a fence line, or let it naturalize in a meadow area. Plant 3, Crocosmia. This is the plant that makes people slow their cars down. When Crocosmia hits full bloom in July and August, the arching stems loaded with fiery orange-red flowers look like living flames moving through the border. There is nothing else in the summer garden that produces that specific quality of heat and visual drama. Nothing. And the fact that most American gardeners have never planted it is one of the great missed opportunities in U.S. home gardening. Some varieties come in golden yellow and deep scarlet, but it is that vivid orange-red that creates the reaction. Hardy in zones 5 through 9, and in zones 5 and 6, the key to reliable return performance is straightforward. Mulch the corms heavily in November with a 4-inch layer of shredded leaves over the entire planting area. That insulation gives them exactly what they need to survive the freeze-thaw cycles of northern winters. Plant crocosmia in front of ornamental grasses where those arching stems can be appreciated fully, or mass it in a cutting garden where the stems make extraordinary long-lasting arrangements. Hummingbirds are drawn irresistibly to the tubular orange flowers from July onward. Plant this near a window you look out of regularly, and you will have front row seats to daily hummingbird visits through the heart of summer. Plant 4. Perennial salvia. This is the plant that solved the dead midsummer garden problem that drives American gardeners absolutely crazy every July. Everything looks spent. The spring bloomers are long finished and the fall plants have not started yet. Perennial salvia fills that gap in the most dramatic color your yard has probably ever seen. Deep violet, cobalt blue, rich burgundy red. These are colors that hold their intensity through full summer heat, when every pastel in your border has already washed out and gone pale. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, salvia blooms strong from late spring through fall, and the secret to keeping it producing all season is consistent deadheading. Cut spent flower spikes back to the next set of leaves and new stems emerge within 2 weeks. Southern gardeners in zones 7 through 9, the varieties Amistad and Black and Blue, handle your heat and humidity better than anything else currently on the market. Plant salvia in front of ornamental grasses or alongside golden black-eyed Susans, and the color contrast stops people in their tracks from the street. Plant 5. Echinacea coneflower. Before you decide you already know everything about this one, stop. The echinacea your grandmother grew, that single purple cone standing stiffly in the back border, is not what is available to American gardeners today. Plant breeders have completely transformed this plant, and most people are still buying the old version. Today's echinacea comes in salmon, deep red, golden yellow, creamy white, and bicolors that look like they belong on a painter's canvas. Varieties like Sunseeker Salmon and Cheyenne Spirit perform reliably from zones 3 through 9, coast-to-coast adaptability that almost no other perennial can match. The bloom window runs from early summer clear through fall. When the flowers finally fade, do not cut those seed heads down. Leave them standing straight through winter because goldfinches and chickadees depend on them when the ground is frozen solid and every other food source has disappeared. No native perennial attracts more species of pollinators per square foot than echinacea at peak bloom. Southern gardeners in zones 7 through 9 give your plant some afternoon shade during the hottest months, and the difference in performance is dramatic. Plant 6. Penstemon, beard tongue. Hummingbirds have known about this plant for centuries. American gardeners are only now catching up with what those birds figured out a long time ago. Penstemon is native to North America. It evolved here, it belongs here, and there are species and varieties adapted to nearly every single U.S. region, from dry, rocky mountain slopes to humid southeastern gardens to cold northern borders in zones 3 and 4. The tubular flowers come in vivid scarlet, rich purple, deep pink, and soft lavender, and they bloom from late spring through midsummer, with certain varieties continuing into fall. Plant 3 or more together in a sunny, well-drained spot, and from Memorial Day onward, ruby-throated hummingbirds in the east and broad-tailed hummingbirds in the west will find them before you have even finished watering. The single most critical thing to know about penstemon is this: do not prune it until late spring. Those old stems protect the crown from freeze damage through the cold months, and cutting them back in fall is the #1 reason this plant fails to return in zones 4, 5, and 6. Leave them standing. The plant knows what it is doing. Plant 7. Liatris, blazing star. This is the native American prairie plant that does something no other perennial on this list does. It blooms from the top of its spike down instead of from the bottom up. That single biological quirk makes it unmistakable in any garden setting, and it is one of the most reliable monarch butterfly magnets available to American gardeners anywhere in the country. Liatris spicata produces tall, feathery purple flower spikes that rise 2 to 4 feet straight up from grass-like foliage. It blooms from July through September and handles heat, drought, and poor soil in ways that would kill nearly everything planted beside it. Hardy in zones 3 through 9 with a drought tolerance once established that is genuinely remarkable. The flowers open sequentially from tip to base over several weeks, extending the display well beyond what a single flush bloom can manage. Plant it in full sun, in masses of 5 or more, and the vertical purple columns create a visual rhythm through the border that anchors everything around them. Monarch butterflies and swallowtails find it immediately. Goldfinches descend on the seed heads from September onward, and the structural interest continues long after the last flower closes. Plant 8. Hardy Geranium, Cranesbill. This is the plant that confuses more American gardeners than almost anything else in the perennial world. When most people hear the word geranium, they picture that red annual sitting in a window box that gets thrown out every October. That plant and this plant share a name and almost nothing else. Hardy geranium, the true cranesbill, is a tough, spreading, long-blooming perennial that returns reliably year after year in zones 4 through 8. The variety called Roseanne is the one to find at your nursery. Roseanne produces vivid blue-violet flowers that bloom longer than any other hardy geranium variety on the U.S. market, running from April through September with a light trim after the first big flush in early summer. Full sun, partial shade, it handles both without complaint. It spreads into a soft ground-covering mound under roses, along shaded borders, and fills the gaps in a planting scheme that nothing else closes as gracefully. Small native bees and hoverflies that cannot access larger, deeper flowers find hardy geranium wide open and easy to work, and they return to it all season long. Plant 9. Amsonia Blue Star. This is the Native American perennial that gives you 2 completely separate, completely spectacular performances in a single growing season, and the vast majority of American gardeners have never once seen it growing in a yard. The first performance happens in late April and May when the star-shaped powder blue flowers open above clean, willowy foliage. That soft blue is a color almost nothing else in the spring garden produces. Not a purple, not a violet, but a true clear powder blue that reads beautifully from across the yard. Then the flowers finish. The foliage stays attractive and full through the summer. And in October, something remarkable happens. The entire plant turns a brilliant golden yellow that rivals the fall color of ornamental trees that cost 10 times as much. 2 shows for the price of 1 plant across zones 3 through 9. Cut amsonia back by 1/3 in late June to keep it compact and encourage denser, more spectacular fall color. Left unpruned, it tends to get floppy through the middle of the season. Gardeners in the southeast and mid-Atlantic. Amsonia tabernaemontana is native to your specific region and will establish faster and root deeper than any imported variety. Native bees that overwinter in hollow stems use the dried stalks as nesting habitat through the cold months. Plant 10. Heuchera Coral Bells. This is the only plant on this entire list that earns its place in your garden, even on the days it is not blooming. The flowers are delicate wands of coral, pink, or white that rise above the foliage from late spring through midsummer, and hummingbirds visit them regularly. But the real performance is the foliage. Deep burgundy, burnt caramel, lime green, silver, colors that hold from March all the way through December in most American climates across zones 4 through 9. And it genuinely thrives in shade, which makes it one of the most valuable perennials you can plant under trees or along the north side of a structure where almost nothing else grows with any color or visual interest. Gardeners in zones 4 through 6, pay attention to one specific issue. Heuchera heaves out of the soil over winter as the ground freezes and thaws repeatedly. Check your plants in early spring, press the crowns firmly back down into the soil, and add a light layer of mulch around the base. That one simple habit keeps your Heuchera thriving for years. That is the first half of this list. 10 perennials that cover your garden from spring through frost and ask almost nothing in return. Which of these first 10 do you already have growing in your yard? And which one are you hearing about for the very first time? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because gardeners across different zones read those answers and make planting decisions based on exactly what you share. The second half of this list is where things get genuinely unusual. Stay with it. Plant 11, Agastache Hyssop. This is the plant that hummingbirds find before you have even finished planting it. Push a few agastache into the ground on a Saturday morning, and by Sunday afternoon, something with wings will have already located it. That is not an exaggeration. That is what happens in yards across this country every summer when this plant hits its bloom stride. Agastache blooms from midsummer through hard frost, which makes it one of the strongest late-season performers on this entire list. When everything else in your border is starting to wind down in August and September, agastache is just hitting its peak. The summer-long series brings colors that did not exist 5 years ago. Vivid coral, deep magenta, soft peach, gentle lilac. Every one of those colors draws pollinators like nothing else in a late-season garden can. Hardy in zones 5 through 10 depending on the variety. The one non-negotiable demand agastache makes above everything else is sharp drainage. Planted in amended gritty soil with excellent water movement and it thrives. Planted in heavy clay that holds moisture through winter and it rots at the crown even inside its hardiness zone. Southwest and southern gardeners in zones 7 through 10, agastache was practically engineered for your heat and dry conditions. It does not just survive your summers, it flourishes through them. Plant 12, Scabiosa, pincushion flower. This one looks so delicate and refined sitting in the border that most people assume it must be difficult and fussy. It is neither. Scabiosa is tougher than it has any right to look, and it blooms from June through late August with consistent deadheading pushing some varieties clear into October. The flowers are soft lavender blue, clean white, and deep burgundy red. Colors that carry the feeling of a wildflower meadow even in the most structured formal border. Hardy in zones 3 through 7, with a cold hardiness that surprises most gardeners given how refined the plant appears. Cut them regularly for the house because Scabiosa makes one of the best and longest-lasting cut flowers of any perennial on this list. One mature established plant can produce over 2,000 seeds in a single season. Deadhead consistently if you want to manage the spread, or let it go and allow it to naturalize with a wildflower quality that looks entirely intentional. Painted lady and swallowtail butterflies are particularly drawn to Scabiosa at peak summer bloom. In the right setting, it functions as a butterfly landing pad from June, straight through the end of summer. Plant 13, Baptisia, false indigo. This is the perennial that looks like it belongs in a botanic garden display and costs almost nothing to maintain once it settles into your yard. The flower spikes are deep violet blue, some varieties producing soft yellow or creamy white, rising dramatically above silvery blue-green foliage in mid-spring. The visual impact when a mature clump is in full bloom stops people in their tracks. After the flowers finish, decorative seed pods develop that rattle in the wind and add structure to the border all the way through October. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, with a drought tolerance once established that is frankly extraordinary. Baptisia develops a deep, searching taproot that anchors it against drought conditions that kill everything planted around it. That same taproot is why you need to plant it exactly where you want it permanently. Transplanting Baptisia after its second year in the ground is nearly impossible without losing the plant entirely. Choose your spot, plant it there, and leave it alone. It will reward that patience by growing into a larger, more beautiful, more structurally impressive clump every single year for decades. Several species of native bees depend on Baptisia specifically within U.S. ecosystems. It is a keystone plant in ways that go well beyond its considerable beauty. Plant 14, Conifolia, red-hot poker. If there is one plant on this list that stops hummingbirds mid-flight, this is it. Conifolia, commonly called red-hot poker or torch lily, produces some of the most dramatic, architecturally striking flower spikes of any perennial available to American gardeners. Those spikes rise 3 to 5 feet tall and carry dense columns of tubular flowers in fiery reds, burning oranges, and warm yellows. From across the yard, a group of them in full bloom looks like a row of lit torches. The tubular flower shape is engineered for the long, slender beak of a hummingbird, and every variety on the market draws them from July onward. Hardy in zones 5 through 9 depending on the cultivar, with some newer varieties pushing hardiness to zone 5 reliably. The variety Flamenco in bright yellow-orange handles northern winters with proper mulching, while Lady Luck with its striking lime-green flowers performs brilliantly across the warmer southern zones. Plant Nonstop in full sun and well-drained soil and give it space because the foliage is bold and architectural even between bloom cycles. The dramatic vertical form creates strong contrast against rounded shrubs and horizontal ground-covering plants, and the combination of red, orange, and yellow on a single spike is a color effect nothing else in the perennial border replicates. This is the plant that earns the most questions from garden visitors every single time. Plant 15, Chalone, Turtlehead. This is the Native American perennial with a flower so genuinely unusual that people stop in the middle of a garden tour and ask what it is every single time without exception. The hooded pink flowers genuinely resemble a turtle's open mouth, not in a vague way that requires imagination, but in a way that is immediately obvious the moment you see the plant in bloom. Rich pink to deep rose pink, blooming from August through October, which makes Chalone one of the latest blooming native perennials available to American gardeners anywhere in the country. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. The place Chalone belongs is anywhere consistently moist. Rain gardens, low spots along a fence line, the edge of a stream or pond, part shade borders where the soil stays damp, and late season color is the hardest thing in the world to find. If your yard has a low wet area where other plants drown and nothing seems to thrive, Chalone will treat that exact problem spot like paradise. Bumblebees are the primary pollinator of this plant. The flower is specifically shaped to accommodate their size and weight, and in late summer, when bumblebee colonies reach their peak population, a stand of Chalone in full bloom is one of the most ecologically active spots in any American yard. Plant 16, Garden Phlox, Phlox paniculata. Garden phlox is one of the most fragrant perennials you can put in the ground, and the 2024 Perennial Plant of the Year from the Perennial Plant Association, a variety called Gianna, has completely repositioned how serious gardeners think about this plant. Gianna grows to 5 feet tall with masses of lavender pink flowers produced on sturdy, self-supporting stems from midsummer through fall, and it carries a disease resistance that older phlox varieties simply cannot match. The older problem with garden phlox was powdery mildew, a white coating that made plants look diseased by August, right when they should have been performing their best. Modern mildew-resistant varieties have eliminated that problem. Gianna and other newer introductions stay clean and bloom strong from July through September, with a fragrance that carries across the yard on a warm evening in a way almost no other perennial can produce. Hardy in zones 4 through 8, Garden Phlox performs in full sun with consistent moisture and rewards division every 3 to 4 years with increasingly vigorous bloom. Plant it at the back of a border where that height works as a backdrop, or in a mass planting where the fragrance compounds across dozens of flower heads simultaneously. Hummingbirds and tiger swallowtail butterflies visit the flowers through midsummer and into fall as later blooming variety choices extend the season. Plant 17, Monarda Bee Balm. There is no perennial in the American garden that attracts more species of wildlife in a single square yard than Monarda at peak bloom. Hummingbirds hover inside the ragged firework-shaped flower heads. Bumblebees work the tubular florets systematically from top to bottom. Sphinx moths arrive in the evening. Swallowtail butterflies cover the outer petals. And the plant smells like oregano and citrus, which means the garden around it carries that scent on every warm afternoon breeze from June through August. Monarda, commonly called bee balm, is native to North America and blooms in vivid scarlet red, deep purple, rich pink, and clean white depending on the variety. Hardy in zones 3 through 9 with a spread that fills a border quickly. Modern mildew-resistant varieties like Jacob Klein in red and raspberry wine in deep pink have solved the powdery mildew issue that limited older types, keeping the foliage clean all season. Plant Monarda in full sun to light shade in consistently moist soil and divide it every 2 to 3 years to keep it vigorous and blooming at its strongest. The spreading habit that can feel aggressive in a small bed becomes an asset in a larger border, or meadow planting, where it naturalizes into sweeping drifts of color. Deadhead spent flower heads and new side shoots continue producing for weeks beyond the initial flush. For a yard that comes alive in July in a way nothing else delivers, Monarda is the plant that makes it happen. Plant 18, Coreopsis, Threadleaf Coreopsis. This is the longest blooming yellow perennial available to American gardeners, and most people walk right past it at the nursery, because the feathery, fine-textured foliage looks too delicate to survive a real summer. That assessment could not be more wrong. Coreopsis verticillata, the threadleaf type, is one of the toughest, most drought-tolerant, most heat-resistant perennials that exists. It blooms from late spring through hard frost, a continuous flush of cheerful golden yellow flowers on plants that rarely exceed 2 feet in height. The variety Zagreb is the compact form that stays tight and mounding without any staking. Moonbeam produces a softer, pale lemon yellow that pairs with virtually everything in the border without clashing. Both are hardy from zones 3 through 9, and both handle dry conditions after establishment that defeat far more expensive and supposedly tougher plants. Coreopsis requires 0 deadheading to rebloom. It simply continues pushing new flowers across the entire growing season without any intervention on your part. Plant it in masses along sunny borders, let it naturalize in a meadow or roadside planting, or use it to fill the front edge of a bed where something low, continuous, and bright yellow is exactly what the composition needs. Native bees and small butterflies work the flowers from the moment they open in spring through the last warm days of October. Plant 19, Veronicastrum Culver's root. Walk through any serious botanical garden from the Midwest to the Mid-Atlantic in July, and you will find this plant. Tall, architectural, absolutely commanding in the back of a border. White or soft lavender candelabra-style flower spikes, rising 4 to 6 feet straight up, with a structural presence that nothing else in the summer garden replicates. This is not a delicate plant. This is not a filler plant. Veronicastrum is a statement, and once you place it correctly in a yard, it becomes the plant every visitor asks about without fail. Hardy in zones 3 through 8, blooming from July through September, and documented as a nectar source for over 100 species of native bees and butterflies across U.S. ecosystems. In the native plant world, ecologists classify it as a keystone species for mid-Atlantic and Midwestern landscapes, meaning entire communities of insects and birds organize part of their seasonal activity around its presence. Plant it at the back of a border, or in the center of an island bed where that height can be fully appreciated. Pair it with echinacea in front and ornamental grasses alongside, and the combination looks like something a professional designer charged thousands of dollars to put together. Established clumps spread slowly and steadily over 3 to 4 years into impressive self-supporting columns that need no staking despite that considerable height. Give it room from the beginning, leave it alone, and Veronicastrum becomes the most talked about plant in your yard within 2 full growing seasons. Plant 20, Triceratops toad lily. Save this one for the very end of the season, and it will give you something no other perennial on this entire list can produce. Spotted, orchid-like flowers blooming in the shade garden from August through November, long after most of the garden world has already surrendered to cold and gone dormant. Triceratops, called the toad lily for the spotted markings on its petals, produces flowers that look like they belong in a tropical greenhouse rather than in a hardy perennial border in Zone 5. Each flower is less than an inch across, but intricately marked with purple spots on white or lavender petals ranged around a central column in a pattern that stops people cold the moment they see it up close. The plant blooms late enough that it fills the gap between the end of the summer perennial season and the first killing frost, a window most shade gardeners have simply learned to accept as empty. Hardy in zones 4 through 9 and one of the very few fall-blooming perennials that genuinely thrives in shade. Plant Triceratops along a shaded path or at the front of a woodland border where those intricate flowers can be seen at close range. The arching stems reach 2 to 3 feet and require no staking. Consistent moisture and rich organic soil give this plant the conditions it needs to establish quickly and spread into slowly expanding clumps over several seasons. For anyone with a shade garden that goes quiet and colorless in September and October, Triceratops is the answer that most gardeners spend years never finding. That is all 20. From catnip to Triceratops, 20 perennials that do not quit on you in July, do not leave your yard looking bare and spent through August and September, and do not require you to keep writing checks at the nursery every single spring just to maintain some color. These plants come back, they bloom long. They feed the bees, the butterflies, and the hummingbirds that make a garden feel genuinely alive rather than just decorated. The difference between a garden that looks spectacular from Memorial Day through the first frost and one that peaks in June and disappears is not luck. It is not a bigger budget. It is knowing which plants actually perform across the full season. And now you know exactly which 20 to reach for. If this list gave you real, usable information, and you know it did, subscribe to Nature Green Discoveries right now. Not because this channel asked you to, but because what just happened in this video happens here every single week. Zone-specific, experience-backed, no-filler information that saves you real money, real time, and real frustration in the garden. The gardeners who find this channel and subscribe are the ones whose yards start genuinely transforming season after season. Subscribe right now and share this video with one gardening friend who needs exactly what this list delivers. And before you go, here is the question this channel wants every gardener watching right now to answer in the comments. Out of all 20 plants on this list, which one are you absolutely certain belongs in your yard this season? And which one surprised you the most? Drop both answers below, because somewhere in this comment section, a gardener in your exact zone dealing with your exact soil conditions is reading what you write. And your real-world experience is worth more to them than any nursery tag or gardening catalog description ever will be.